Welcome back to Federal Insights, a discussion on smart base of the future, sponsored by Verizon on Federal News Network. My guests today are Cornelius Brown, the Director for the Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schramsky, the Managing Partner for 5G Public Sector at Verizon. I'm your moderator, Scott Maucione. So, Brian, we left off talking about encryption, zero trust, cybersecurity, all those sorts of things. 5G, in some ways, is a double-edged sword. It leaves you open to more surface area for attack, but also gives you faster faster response times and things like that. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that 5G might bring, and then we can go into some of the advantages.
Sure. I mean, there's, by public service announcement here. So as we move to 5G, and we hear this a lot, not only from the DoD, but also Homeland Security and Department of Justice, right? So first and foremost, we'll always be CALEA compliant, right? So that's one of the fears I would say when it comes to 5G. There is a fear of going dark, right? Higher levels of encryption, but rest assured we're CALEA compliant. I think also we're starting to see around 5G and some of the security and threat factors out there is around supply chain, right? In that having a trusted supply chain to ensure that we have a secure network. And I applaud the DoD as well as the State Department, as well as other agencies that are really looking at that and doing that. Obviously at Verizon, what we do here is look at many different things, right? So we work with the 3GPP. We actually do industry outreach. So we work with our partners out there, and I'd say the community, so the other telcos as well. So we work in accordance. It's in our best interest for this great country to actually make sure that we all have a very good security model when it comes to 5G. And then, you can never, rest on your laurels when it comes to security, right? So there's also, better encryption in 5G, mutual authentication, which we adopt as we get into release 15. And there's some new things coming out, release 16, as we get into standalone core in 22 from Verizon, which we're very excited for. The encryption in that slice opens up network slicing, which we're very excited for. But, and then you take it one step further when you start looking at zero trust architecture, you look at software defined perimeter, when you have, security platforms that are overlaying that, RAN, radio access network security, and what the carrier is doing and putting on top of it. You have a more comprehensive model that it's very exciting for DoD, right? So they can look at very different, analyst reports, right? It opens up, I would say, I would say a threat vector, but I think one of the things that we're seeing from the pandemic, which I think is really push, I would say, telework and mobility, is I have to conduct my job not inside of four walls, right? There were some policies, there wasn't consistency across, and I think we see this in DoD that saying, hey, for COOP, God forbid, the next pandemic, a cyber attack or a power outage that I can't get in this particular facility, how do I conduct my business, right? How do I conduct military business? And I think where you see on 5G, now that I have the ability to do more things and more operational networks, right? Outside a IT worker, office worker, say in the Pentagon, that more operation along the flight line or in the warehouse or in a test bed or in a theater of war, I think you're now seeing with 5G, I have a network that can do what traditional wireline used to do and what traditional wireless. 5G is really in the middle of those two. At the same time, the threat factors on both sides of that aisle come into play, but having a coordinated security policy is the right approach. But rest assured, the challenge that we want to make sure is we have a valid, secure supply chain, and also working with industry standards. And most importantly, having outreach, working with public sector agencies, federal, state, and local, to make sure that we meet their needs and their challenges when it comes there. Because I think some things open up the mind, right? When we talk about edge compute, as Cornelius mentioned, things like FedRAMP come into play, right? Because we're actually hosting the application at the edge. So the cool thing is with 5G, we can take, cloud security or network security, and actually 5G uses both of those. We just start bringing it in. It's not, I have to design something completely different just for 5G, right? We can leverage some of those best security practices when we talk about 5G and edge compute.
One of the things we haven't talked about much is encryption. encryption is getting more and more complex over time. And then I'm assuming also with having more devices, encryption is going to be more complex. So either Cornelius or Brian, where does that fit in with 5G and maybe even like quantum computing?
Sure.
Because rings are going to get a lot longer than we can imagine.
No, that's a great question, Scott. I mean, obviously with 5G in release 15 and release 16, there's higher levels of encryption with 5G. We're adopting those networks. As I mentioned before, right, there's over the top that you can do, right, if it's software-defined perimeter, zero trust architecture, all that kind of stuff, right? But you bring up a good point with the quantum computing, not quantum key distribution, which we do use as well. But that's always a concern, right? How do we make sure that we have a very secure network, not only for the military, but also the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of customers on a commercial network, right? Not only are we doing work for the DoD, but we have a lot of financial transactions happening on our network, right? So, it's always a concern. It will never go away. And it just keeps us on our toes and make sure that we have a very secure network and always improving that network. Right. And we're looking at other things. Right. So another topic that we get a lot of questions about on 5G is O-RAN. Right. And we're committed to O-RAN. We're part of the 5G O-RAN Alliance. And we're welcoming new interfaces and possibly new security models that actually come out of O-RAN. So we publicly stated that we're excited about O-RAN, putting development work behind it. And we're looking for the first partner portfolio to actually supply us and possibly those scenarios when it has advanced security considerations when it comes to O-RAN and actually incorporating into our overall network strategy.
And Cornelius, let's move to the actual future warfighter. 5G has the possibility to make warfighters more lethal, to save lives, to help them stay more connected. Where did these possibilities go? And can you talk maybe a little bit more granularly about how it might help an individual warfighter even?
Yeah. So, two areas I would call out that, we saw accelerated coming out of the pandemic. And the first one was really centered around immersive learning and education, right? So when you think about traditional learning, how that typically will happen in a classroom setting, we saw that shift and we'll continue to see that shift into solutions like augmented reality and digital environments. And we have a number of solutions underway that are being piloted today. Another one we could touch on would be around healthcare, right? Where when you think about, virtual doctor visits, remote patient monitoring on, wearable devices and improved patient outcomes, we will continue to see that be increased. And those are both great examples, coming out of a COVID pandemic that we were able to improve the lives of those on base and improve, the capabilities that we're providing to the warfighter.
So to create all of this 5G, there has to be obviously a backbone to make sure these things are working and are steady and hardy to make sure the Defense Department can use them for all the information it needs. How are you building that out? How are you making sure that's secure?
Yeah, so one of the things that Verizon remains focused on is delivering our One Fiber project, which happens to be one of the largest infrastructure projects in the US. And that's really helping continue the momentum in scaling 5G because to your point, fiber is a very important element. And last year, we really hit our stride delivering almost 1,400 route miles of fiber per month.
I've heard of different future technologies as well, maybe ones that we haven't even fathomed yet that might be helpful and maybe able to connect into 5G. We've seen, I've heard of some fabrics that have, connectivity through the internet. You're able to monitor people's vitals and make sure that they're still alive, see when they're anxious or when they're calm and all those sorts of things. Have you heard of any farther future technologies and, what other applications might there be that we may not have even thought about yet?
Yeah, so within the DoD, the wearables is becoming a segment that is continuing to grow. We've seen solutions like connected rings as an example that are constantly checking, vitals for those that are out in the field. And, one of the things we'll see around telehealth and telemedicine in general is just the massive explosion because, the ability to detect things ahead of time and be predictive and offer, solutions that, really maintain the warfighter in the field. So that is definitely an area that we're going to see continue.
And Brian, one thing that people maybe sometimes forget is that military families also live on these bases and they'll be connected to 5G as well. What are some of the just regular things that you might be able to get that might be really excited for you?
Yeah, I mean, we forget about that, right? So we talk about all the next generation technology. So, I mean, from military personnel, right, they're, living on the base, right? They'll be able to take a shuttle or bus, they'll get them around, right? All that cool stuff. But more importantly, just connection, right? So if they're using video calling, whatever platform that they're using, right? Google, Zoom, FaceTime, right? On these connected devices, they'll just have a much better experience, right? They'll be in high definition video. They'll have faster bit rate so they can do more videos, they can upload information, all of that good stuff, right? And you couldn't ask for much more, right? To have a very intimate and immersive experience in a personal way, right? Where you're connected, is very exciting. I know I have 2 teenage daughters, and if I want to call them, I had to do a video. Audio, they don't like the audio experience. They want to see you and do it every day. So, imagine for military personnel that, they do the great work to protect this great country, if they can connect in a video, that's awesome. And, that gets me excited, and I'll probably tear up. I'm pretty emotional. I'm like the Dick Vermeil here. So it is really cool stuff to be able to do that and provide that technology.
And I'd assume that could probably help with future education as well. I mean, people that are in remote areas during the pandemic, there's probably really could have used 5G, but in the future we may have people, anywhere really, and maybe even using 5G up in space at times, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we learned from the pandemic is we had a huge growth engine in terms of distance learning, right? So if we look at K through 12, right? Huge learning aspect, right? Where people didn't have connectivity, we're able to provide connectivity. I think that's very applicable in the military, right? Where we have, if we have isolation, with the pandemic, I can't go in certain barracks, I can only have certain people in there, but I want to be connected so they can have a device and be connected and actually have that training. I think where you're going to take to the next step in some of the use cases, as Cornelius mentioned, is things where I want to do predictive maintenance and I actually want to put on an AR, VR headset and actually, work on a piece of, a tank, a plane, a Navy vessel, right? And I don't necessarily have the expertise, but I'm able to do that. I will tell you near and dear that's right there with the DoD. We actually have a project right now with the VA, the Veterans Administration in Palo Alto, California, where we're actually using 5G to power robotic surgery, right? Where now we can get 3D images, where today, you have static 2D images, right? Where you kind of, left, right side of the brain, top, bottom. Now we can actually have a 3D hologram, and it's leveraging our partners as well as our 5G MEC, as well as our 5G RAN, and actually able to do that, right? So you can actually look around and see up, down, and right rather than looking at static 2D images, right? So be able to power that technology, that will only get better, right? So, I tell this to people all the time, right? When we rolled out LTE and 4G, Uber and Lyft or Airbnb weren't thought of, right? And all of that experience now is done through a mobile device, right? So now that we have that 5G technology, I tell this all the time, this is a 10-year project, right? We're like year 4 in. We started really in 2017. We've got a lot of runway, if you will, use military terms, as Cornelius mentioned. We just got the C-band auction. You'll see that rolling out over the next 3 years into 2024. That's 3 years from now. And then all those applications, the ecosystem will only increase as we go the next couple of years, right? So rest assured, this is a marathon, not a sprint. But at the end of the day, customers want connectivity, they want reliability. And that's all we're about. And we can power that infrastructure from the military. I think it's a win-win for us, and it's a win-win for them.
I'd like to thank my guest today, Cornelius Brown, the Director for the Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schwamsky, the Managing Partner for 5G Public Sector at Verizon. I'm your moderator, Scott Maucione, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Verizon.